Welcome back to the Moms Like Me podcast, powered by Support Now. I am thrilled, truly thrilled, to have our guest here today, Sara Derting. For context, Sara is probably the person that lives the furthest from me in terms of podcast land. She is in Alaska, so we have worked extremely hard to navigate internet, to navigate time zones, to make this conversation happen. But I am very confident once you learn a little bit more about her journey to motherhood and her incredible child, you will see why we worked so hard to get this episode up and going. So, Sara, first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, I've gotten to know you through Support Now. You have an adorable child. You've leveraged Support Now for some fundraising support for your son, Asa, who has spina bifida. And as I was learning a little bit more about your situation, I was really inspired to frankly learn more about spina bifida in general, because I think it's one of these things that you hear kind of as noise in the background of a pregnancy, but unless you have it or your child has it, you really don't go deeper than that. And I find that a lot, by the way, in pregnancy. It's like we're testing for all these things, but like, what exactly is that? And perhaps ignorance is bliss. But I'm very, very excited to have you share a little bit more of your story. And so I want to start kind of way back when you got pregnant. Talk me through like when you first knew or had any suspicion that something might have been different about this pregnancy.
So Asa is our first, so I really had no expectations as to what a pregnancy would be. But at 6 weeks, I hemorrhaged and I went to the OB the very next day. And this was still COVID time, 2020. And they did an ultrasound, found a heartbeat, and then proceeded to tell me that I had lots of fibroids and that the pregnancy was not going to actually implant. And so basically they were like, come back in a few days and we'll continue to walk you through a miscarriage. So I, left that appointment and I actually just went home. And as I was going home, I literally just prayed and I was like, this child is so wanted. And so I was like, just find a home, somewhere in there, find a home. And lo and behold, he did. And I was pretty sick my whole pregnancy. And then around Christmas time, we decided we'll take, a small family trip, one last little holiday, visit soon-to-be grandparents, and kind of pick out a name. We didn't want to know if we were having a boy or a girl. So over that time, we decided if we were going to have a boy, we were going to name Asa Robert. And if it was a girl, it was going to be Isla Claire. And we got back from that on January 4th. And I went in on January 5th because at our 20-week anatomy scan, they couldn't find all the measurements that they needed in like his legs and things. He wasn't moving enough. And so we left that scan before Christmas just with, he's not moving enough. We need to get the rest of the measurements. When you get back, his head is measuring a little bit small. But we didn't really think anything of that. They were like, it could just be your fibroids shadowing our scan. So come back January 5th. I go back to the OB. I sent my husband back to work because I was like, they're just going to finish taking measurements. And I go in, they do the scan, get all the measurements. And then that was also the appointment because I was just over 24 weeks that you start seeing different doctors because you don't know who's going to deliver you.
Right. Like rotations. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I had never met this lady before. I go into the office after the ultrasound. She comes in and she goes, well, your son has spina bifida. Do you have any questions? And I was like, what? And she just started rattling things off. He's got Chiari malformation, hydrocephalus, and I hadn't really heard spina bifida. So I really didn't know what she was talking about. So I kind of latched onto that and, my mind wandered and then came back and she was like, but he doesn't have club feet. And I was like, well, that's good. And I knew what hydrocephalus was because I had a friend growing up who had some pretty severe shunt complications. And so my mind was just like, we can't have a shunt. Like, I don't want a shunt in my life. And then I was like, okay, I don't have any questions because I don't know what you're talking about. But she's like, well, you need to see a specialist. And I was like, okay, left that appointment, called my husband. Here we still didn't want to know if we were having a boy or a girl. But here she blurted it out. So I was like, Asa has spina bifida. So yeah, that's kind of the early, very condensed.
Sara, for those that aren't familiar with spina bifida, what is it?
So there's different types of spina bifida. Our son has the most severe form. It's called myelomeningocele, and the spinal cord is literally open. It's exposed. There's a hole in their back. While, we as moms are like, the safest place for our baby is growing inside of us. Every day that he was growing, his spinal nerves were exposed to the amniotic fluid, and that could and was causing damage. But we needed him to stay in long enough so that he could grow as much as he possibly could. So it's such a catch-22.
Yeah. I want to go back to when you found out and you talked about the, I guess we'll say, lack of bedside manner in that case. Have you reflected on like how you would have preferred to receive that information? It's so hard when you're getting a diagnosis that you're unfamiliar with. And, we have people that listen to this podcast that are medical professionals, nurses, things of that sort. What would have been your preference in that particular case?
I think, just coming in and being more positive, because there was so many things that were positive about him, you know, and then also asking if I wanted somebody on the phone or to come and join me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially given the fact that you had told your husband not to come, like,
Right.
"Hey, you might wanna make a quick call, I wanna share some news that I think it might serve you best if there's another set of ears here," or something like that
Right.
would have kind of laid the conditions of like, "Okay, she's gonna tell us something important, and I'm not doing this alone."
Right.
What do you remember, Sarah, you said, like, "I don't have any questions. How am I supposed to have questions about something I hardly even understand?" Like, what did you do following that appointment? What were the next few steps you took?
So I literally went home and I got on my computer and I started Googling what spina bifida actually was. And I came across the Spina Bifida Association. And my husband had actually heard of spina bifida. So
Okay.
growing up, he knew somebody, very distant family friend who had spina bifida. So he at least had a concept. And he was like, he's living a very normal life in the grand scheme of things. And so I was like, okay. But I just started Googling, started reading, and then I found something about fetal surgery.
Yeah.
Well, I also found that that has to be done by about 25 weeks. So, literally, the 24 hours after finding out, I got a phone call back from my OB saying, nobody local will actually take your case. We don't have any specialists here. You can go 2.5 hours away or you can go 4.5 hours away. And ultimately, we picked the 4.5 hour away and went to Chapel Hill in North Carolina just for the bigger facility and the more knowledge. But I called Mayo Clinic. I called all these major hospitals asking them if they would take our case and do fetal surgery basically in, the next 4 days. And at the end of the day, our MFM, he did the same thing. He called all of his friends and nobody would take our case because of my fibroids. So Asa was a great candidate. I was not. It would have given the doctors less than 4 inches of space to work on his spine and close up his spine and put him back inside me.
Yeah, so I want to pause here because I don't think a lot of people are familiar with fetal surgery. I have learned a lot about it. It is fascinating, but explain to everyone what a fetal surgery is and the risks involved in this.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Basically, opened me up like they would have done a C-section on me and exposed his tiny little spine and his back and his body and done surgery on his spine to put his spinal cord back and cover it, and then put him back in my womb and sewed everything up. And then it would have been just praying how long can the pregnancy go, because the biggest complication with fetal surgery right off the bat is that they aren't able to, like, the womb can't handle it and the baby has to be delivered right then and there. And so then you've got a 24, 25 week baby. So,
Unbelievable that that surgery exists. So for
yeah.
you, you go to Chapel Hill, and what do they tell you?
So, yeah, they were like, we can't do fetal surgery, but he is looking great overall. He does have some slight hydrocephalus. He's got the Chiari malformation, no club feet. So you don't have to worry about that once he's born. And they just kind of go down the gamut. There's probably going to be bladder and bowel surgeries. We don't know if he's going to walk or how he will walk or ambulate. It's all wait and see, basically. But they do a more in-depth ultrasound that they can get a little better picture. They offered me to deliver vaginally versus C-section. There's no proof that having a spina bifida baby vaginally over C-section actually helps their outcome
Okay.
majorly. We opted for C-section because of fibroids and other things. I ended up with gestational diabetes and everything, and so by the end of my pregnancy, I was just like, "I just want this done. I want him out. I want him in my arms."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Sarah, I would imagine that, from the appointment in Chapel Hill, you and your husband are processing every emotion imaginable. Here you are expecting your first child, a boy, and it comes with all of these conditions and concerns that you probably never anticipated. How did you and your husband get through that? Like, how did you support each other? What sort of support did you need? What was your mindset?
it's so hard to even remember. Like, it happened so fast, but my husband was a great support system to me. He let me just cry it all out, basically. And he was like, "You're gonna be a great mom." And, he was processing things, but was on a different level. It's my body that's supposed to be protecting him. And so as a mom, that's really hard to like process and think about that. Like, it didn't do that. Sorry. But he was trying to process, how am I going to support my family in all the finances, all the whatever is to come. And, and then through COVID and all of that, and our job situations were all over the place. And yeah, I think we're still processing, like, but we had a great friend group at the time when we lived in North Carolina, and they started a fundraiser for us so that basically for the first year after they did a GoFundMe, I didn't have to stress about me working because they were like, "We've got you and we will help support you." And
Yeah.
our families were great support. My mom came down when Asa was delivered, and she worked long distance and stayed with us and helped us for quite a while and was there at delivery in case we didn't know how long he'd be in the NICU. So my husband was like, "I know I have X amount of days and then I'm going to have to go home." And, we didn't want me to be there completely by myself.
Yeah.
So,
I want to go back to your mental state though for a second. So, because you're in this purgatory between, call it your 24-week appointment where you get this
mhm.
news to when you deliver around 35 weeks.
Yeah.
I know it's a blur. And were there any habits? Was there anything you did on a day-to-day basis to try to maintain a healthy mindset, quote unquote, a positive, mentality? I know these things are so hard to process and you don't even know what to be sad or scared of because again, there's so much unknown.
No.
But do you recall making any commitments to any daily habits or what were the things you did to keep going? Because this like beautiful, majestic pregnancy that you had dreamt of is now kind of taken off road in a way that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah. So there's a couple verses in Psalm that, you knit me together perfectly in my mother's womb. And I repeated that in my brain daily from the moment he was diagnosed to, the day I saw him in front of me. And I found Facebook groups at that point, which were extremely helpful to have parents who have gone before and adults living with spina bifida that were very positive and like it helped us ask questions of the unknowns. And everybody was like, diagnosis day is the hardest day of this journey. It will be so much easier once you see them and they're delivered. And even if you can't hold them, but they're in front of you, it becomes like this real thing. They are there, and when you're in the moment of it, you're like, that's crazy. But now I find myself trying to help parents understand that is true.
But that's a really interesting point. I've never heard it quite framed like that way. That diagnosis day in some ways is the hardest because I think your brain is wired to go into the worst possible scenario because you don't know what it is. And if you Google it, you're gonna see the most extreme conditions or the worst possible outcomes and all of the side effects. And while that could be an outcome, they don't typically happen all at once, right? They're sequential. And you don't yet even know who this child is. You haven't even had like the moment where it connects that this is still ultimately your child. And so
Right.
it's so abstract that all you attach yourself to are the symptoms, the diagnosis, the potential negative outcomes without seeing all the good and
Right.
all the happiness that this child still brings you regardless of the fact that it's not, quote typical, which is really a very powerful reminder for supporting people like yourself. Like if you hear that a friend of yours or a family member of yours has a diagnosis like this, don't jump to the most negative outcome
Yeah.
because you're still ultimately there to support the humans that are coming about.
Yeah.
And I think it's just natural inclination to just jump to the worst case scenario.
Well, and the doctors are giving you the worst case scenario because they have to. Like liability, they have to give you the worst case
Yeah.
scenario, and most parents get offered termination. If the doctors actually see what are like most spina bifida kids lead a very happy, healthy life. And you know, are they going to do everything the same way that we are doing it? No, but can they do everything in their own way? Absolutely. But
Yeah.
that doesn't get said at diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's like what moms wanna hear, and I think moms wanna hear this across any diagnosis, like, they will be okay and you will be okay. And okay is relative, right? You will
Yeah.
figure this out. His life, your life will look different than others, but everyone's life looks different than
Right.
others. So it's like all you want to hear is that assurance that this is not the news you expected, but you will survive this and so will he. And it sounds like there's just so many miles of interpretations and while doctors are certainly need to be responsible towards liability and all of that,
Well,
they miss how the tone and the words can greatly impact the mental health of the mom, which still is ultimately impacting the child.
right. And then we don't address the mental health of the parents. We give you the information about what you need to do for your child and what's going to happen when they're born, but we don't address us as the adults in the picture or the moms for that matter. I literally just said, since moving to Alaska, we've met a friend who's had a son who's had different special needs. He's a lot older than Asa, but that connection has even been great. But I said to her, I said, I think at 5 years, I am finally going through postpartum and getting over it because you don't have that opportunity at birth with diagnosis at birth or right before birth. You just get thrown into go mode of what does my child need? And nobody asks you what does mom need? Or here's mental health for mom and dad to process all.
No, it's such an important call out, and I think that a lot of NICU moms specifically feel that, right? There's an immediate disconnect with your child. They're in the NICU, hopefully less than days, but for oftentimes it's weeks or months, and it's all focus
Yeah.
on the baby, baby, and even the mom, right? The mom falls into the trap of
Right.
what does the baby need? What does the baby need? What does my child need? And all the while, to your point, you can't even process your own postpartum because your brain, and again, are biologically, you are designed to think that my number one responsibility is to protect that child and not necessarily to protect myself.
Right. I
It's
went into what can I do for my son? And what I could do is I could pump. So I was like, I'm going to feed my kid any way I can. And, all the doctors were like, holy cow. But I was like, this is what I can do. I,
yeah.
he's going into surgery in the morning and I can't hold him. I can't, I can barely touch him. And yeah,
So, Sarah, you delivered at 35 weeks. He spent um, 10 days in the
10
NICU,
days.
which
Yeah.
did that surprise you?
Yes. Yeah, I did. I think it surprised everybody a little bit, but he had his surgery and then they were trying to figure out how to hold him down. He was moving so much that they were bringing in OTs and PTs to try to figure out how to keep him still, and he hasn't stopped moving since.
Well, it is ironic that in that 20-week appointment, you couldn't get measurements because he wouldn't move, and look at him
Right.
now.
Yeah.
So, kids change and these children surprise us, no?
100%. Yeah. Right before he was like a year old, we had a urologist like, we were talking, and he was like, well, it's not like he's going to be running around. I never went back to him, by the way,
Yeah,
but
it's like,
I
"See ya."
just want I just want to walk my kid into his office with him like riding his bike now because
It's amazing. Yeah, it's
yeah.
like you never underestimate these kids, like,
No.
there's just a different certain kids have an opportunity to defy the odds, and parents are gonna advocate for their kids and what they see in them or what they're capable of.
Right.
So, what I wanna understand a bit better, so he comes home 10 days.
Yeah.
How afraid are you? Like, are you nervous to bring him home? Or are you just like, "Nope, get me out of here, like, I got this." What was your headspace like then?
I think I was more in at that point, we had kind of been away from home for about 2 weeks because we went down a little bit before delivery, and so I think I was just ready to be home.
Yeah.
His back had healed up from his surgery really nicely. We were watching his head circumference and for hydrocephalus and see if he would need a shunt or anything. We were having such frequent follow-ups. Like, I wasn't really nervous. I was a nanny and I taught dance, so I had been around lots of kids, so I knew the kid side of things. We definitely had to be careful to not get his back incision infected. So that was a little bit precarious. Like, we
Sure.
were diapering backwards and on his belly for a little bit and putting extra things called a butt flap to keep things from going places. And so that was a little bit hard. And we had some feeding difficulties. He wasn't able to nurse because he had lip and tongue ties that ultimately needed to be revised. And he had learned to eat on his belly with his head to the side through a bottle in the NICU. So we found a lactation consultant working through that. But ultimately, I was grateful to be home and
Yeah.
not, you know, because I was discharged at 4 days, and we were actually blessed that we were in the same hospital that he was in. A lot of parents, their kids get taken to a children's hospital, and the moms are in a different hospital. So
Oh,
that was not our case. So I was able to go upstairs and see him and stuff, but nobody also prepares you for leaving your child at the hospital
yeah.
or what that feels like or looks like.
So, Sarah, how is he doing today? What, like, you talked about this and we alluded to this earlier. Like, there's so many positive outcomes that never get spoken about when you hear spina bifida. Talk to us, like, how is he doing today? Like, what is he doing that kind of has surpassed your expectations? So, and what are some of his challenges?
Yeah, so I mean, all the things that he's doing, he's just turned 5 the end of March, and we put pedals on his two-wheel bike and he took off. He done balance bike. He doesn't have leg braces. He doesn't have a shunt. We don't have to cath him or on a bowel routine in that sense of like doing an enema. We are very much on a time toileting and we're slowly trying to still figure out what his body can or cannot do or can or cannot feel. But he is healthy in that respect, so we're just gonna wait and let him kind of tell us. Because at the end of the day, he has to take over his care for the rest of his life. So, if we can be in a position to not have to make all those decisions for him now and give him an opportunity to have a say, that's what we've decided to do. He did have something called an ETV/CPC done right after his first birthday instead of a shunt. So, he's had brain surgery, but that happened then, and we haven't had any issues since, and his fluid is draining through a hole that they drilled at the back of his head instead of putting a tube in.
Wow.
So, and then we do a lot of physical therapy. We actually have travel across the country. We've actually just recently stopped doing physical therapy in Alaska, and we are just going to continue with our intensives out of Atlanta, actually, the Lawrenceville area. So, but yeah, I mean, we have just kind of sought alternatives from the norm also, which has been an interesting ride to kind of navigate with the doctors and the professionals. But like his neurosurgeon moved from North Carolina to Missouri, and we followed her there. And we just had his follow up in March, and she said he is the most mobile myelomeningocele kid she's ever seen. So she's
Wow.
like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, share it with others.
That's great. That's amazing. You've got to be so proud of yourself.
uh,
I mean, proud of him,
so
but
proud of
also
him.
proud of him, but proud of yourself. I think about this often. Moms are so quick to give credit to everyone else but themselves. You and
Mhm.
your husband ultimately have put him in a position to thrive, Sarah, and that is, I mean, really just incredible. As we begin to wrap up, and by the way, we're going to tag the Support Now registry here because your child is so adorable. I've told you this before. I'm so smitten by him. You can feel his personality through the pictures that you've posted, which I genuinely enjoy seeing. I am curious, specifically, what do you wish you could have told yourself at
Mm.
24 weeks when that mean doctor came in with that attitude of the very matter of fact diagnosis and all that was running through your brain, I'm sure at 200 miles an hour,
Yeah.
seeing where Asa is today. And I know that there's no such thing as done. I'm under
No.
no illusion that your journey and his journey isn't going to continue to be turbulent and up and down at moments. But what do you wish you could tell that version of yourself, that younger version?
To literally just take every day. Like, don't try to think too far in the future because you will lose out on the now. And I think that's one of the biggest things that he's actually taught me is that he is just a kid who will go and explore anything and do anything and wants to learn it all. And, if we're not in the moment, we lose it. So you can't get it back.
You can't get it back. Oh, so beautiful. It's so true, though. And like your story reflects that. It really does. And I'm so impressed that you've been able to stay so grounded throughout all of this. I mean, again, also a cross country move from North Carolina to Alaska. I mean, you're really just, you're
Mm.
still living and you're still prioritizing what is right in front of you and not, is seemingly not too afraid of, well, what happens after this and after this, after this. Let him get to your point, kind of following his lead on when he's ready for certain milestones and not pushing too many things on him. And again, like it seems that has suit him extremely well.
I think also not ever saying no. If your kid wants to try something or do something, or you want your kid to try or do something, don't let somebody tell you no.
Yeah.
Just do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah Derting, you are fabulous. I continue to learn so much through you, through him. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing more. Thank you for your honesty.
Thank you.
Again, these things you hear these diagnoses, they're so scary, but when you can put a mom's name or face or voice and their experience, I really believe that it begins to kind of break down the fear that future moms have if and when, a sort of diagnosis like this occurs. And it sounds like you've already contributed towards putting it back into the community by being that voice, being that positive reinforcer to those moms that are earlier in the journey. And I think more of that, as you know, it's so easy to Google and see the worst. That's easy. It's much harder to have people be amplified that are saying, yes, this may not be what you wanted. And let me tell you about my Asa. Let me tell you about my child. And let me give you the reasons why you should be optimistic as well. No two children are the same.
Right.
And it also, I think it encourages other spina bifida moms to speak up.
I think so too. And spina bifida is nicknamed the snowflake condition because even the same lesion level and what should be the same nerves affected are not. And I wish that somebody would have said there's lesion level and there's function level, and those can be completely different.
Right. Right. Sarah Derting, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to continuing, honestly, the journey. I can't believe that you've traveled to Atlanta where I live. So,
I know.
knock on wood, God willing, one day we'll get to meet in person. But thank you so much
Yes.
for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.